Take it away, Graham.
Hello and welcome back to another session of the Biotensegrity Tea Party or Biotensegri Tea Party, presented by the Stephen M. Levin Biotensegrity Archive. We're pleased to welcome Steve here tonight to talk about or present his video on mussels, which is going to be very entertaining indeed, with lots of questions afterwards. My name's Graham Scarr, and I'm coming from Nottingham in the United Kingdom. And my co-hosts are Susan Lowell de Solorzano.
Hi there, I'm in Washington, D.C.
And Chris Clancy.
Hi, I'm coming to you from Deep Cove on the Coast Salish Nation territory.
Near Vancouver.
Near Vancouver in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, before we start proceedings, we always start before everything else with a toast to the occasion. But Chris suggests maybe something else.
Graham, before we do the toast, would it be a good time to talk about our special donors for the archive donations?
Oh yes, we have. We don't normally have adverts on this channel, but we have two people who've promised to match any donations up to the size of $4,000, and because the Biotensegrity Archive is a non-for-profit organisation, we depend for much of the things we do on your donations, which are always appreciated. So by the end of this or before that,
and if I can add that because we're independent researchers and we don't have a university to help us pay the thousands of dollars that it costs to make a research article public access, we have to just pull that money in ourselves. So we try to give it back to the community in terms of things like access to papers.
Thank you.
So that's one of the things your money goes to if you give to the archive, because we don't have anyone on payroll. All of the cookies are being made by hand still. So
I've just put the link in the chat.
Thank you. And Chris, you want to talk about the upcoming class that's being offered?
Well, I'll just quickly say that we've got something really exciting happening in January, and that is an advanced concepts in biotensegrity. This is a 3-month course with 6 seminar sessions with Susan, and then individuals can choose either 3 or 6 one-on-one sessions with Susan. And this is project oriented. It's something we're really excited about, but let's get on with the tea party. And later on, when we're watching the video, I'll put some links up in case anyone's interested.
Thanks, Chris. Over to you, Graham.
Right, it's time for a toast. So grab your favorite tipple and your favorite glass or cup, and I propose a toast to the long live Biotensegrity tea parties. Cheers.
Cheers.
Chin chin.
Okay, let's be hearing from Steve.
All right, I'm going to share the video.
Hi, yeah, so I just introduced this video a little bit.
Yes.
I've had a real problem with internal and external forces and what muscles are and what they do. And it certainly has changed over the many years I've been working in this business. So, I learned about muscles the same way as all of you have learned about muscles, but my whole idea of how muscles actually work have completely changed, and I hope I can convince you to think along the lines that I do. So I made this little video, and we'll see how it is, and I expect lots and lots of questions. Hopefully I can answer some of them.
All right, let's see if we can do this. Do you see it up?
Yes, we see it, Susan. It's not in an expanded view at this point.
Okay, let's see if I can do
There
that.
we go.
How about now?
That's it.
All right, here we go.
Can we make it larger?
So let's talk about muscles.
Hold on, it's not large enough? Graham?
If it could be larger, it'd be good. My eyesight's not as it was.
All right, yeah, you know what? If I'm going to very quickly check the YouTube channel. Sorry, folks, to see how it looks there. Because I'm not sure there's anything I can do from this end
Okay.
to make it look larger. I think it looks full screen.
Graham,
Okay.
if you try closing down your participant window in your chat, it might
Yeah.
appear bigger on your screen.
Okay. Yeah,
Here's
that's
what we
better.
know about
Yeah.
muscles.
Okay.
Muscles function by shortening or lengthening. One muscle does one thing to one joint. Muscles can pull you up as going from sitting to standing. Muscles work as agonists and antagonists. Muscles are either on or off. EMGs can tell you when a muscle is active. A muscle is only active when there's an EMG signal. Muscles are the prime movers of an organism. Now, if you believe all that, I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you. As none of that is true. And why? Because you are dealing with collagen. And collagen is not one of your usual states of matter, solid, liquids, or gas. It's something altogether different. Solid, liquid, and gases behave in very predictable ways, but there is a fourth form of matter, soft matter, common to just about all biologic matter, and to quote the soft matter physiologist, biology is soft matter come alive. We will fill in the details of this later as we go along, but for now let's go back to our list. Let's start with muscles being on or off. Part of my misspent youth was as a surgeon, often treating patients who are fully anesthetized. Under anesthesia, everything is at a resting state. There is no pain response or voluntary muscle contraction. But if you cut any soft tissue, skin, fascia, muscle, tendon, the edges pull apart, indicating they are under tension. Muscles are tension springs and can only pull, creating an internal force. When a bone breaks, the edges overlap, indicating they are under compression, and they can interact with an external force. The overlap is with non-weight bearing, and even under deep anesthesia. So it is not only gravity that compresses bone, but also muscle. The entes, where muscle attaches to bone, is never on the ends of bone, but always along its shaft. Muscles that pull up counter muscles that pull down, and they compress the bone. So as muscles pull in, bone pushes out. Bones are very springy, much more so than tendon or cartilage. And some of that springiness comes from the muscle tone that stiffens the bone and makes it more springy. As we have already noted, even under deep anesthesia, there is intrinsic tension in muscle, what has been referred to as resting muscle tone. This is a stress-strain curve for usual non-living construction matter. The area under the curve is the potential energy stored in the system. Note that without stress, there is no strain or deformation of the structure, no stored energy. The green curve is the stress-strain curve of biologic matter. The tension in the system never zeroes out. There is always some residual tension and some stored energy. In muscles, this residual tension is not picked up by an EMG. In fact, EMG recording is a limited tool and shows activity only during the active phase of muscle increasing tension. And though anesthetized, recumbent, and standing persons may have considerably different muscle tone, their EMGs will look essentially the same, a burst of activity and then relatively flat. So muscle tone, no matter how great, is not recorded by an EMG. And although muscle tone may vary, a muscle is never slack. The idea depicted here that muscles can hang like a slackened rope are just nonsense. So if this tennis player, if standing still and maintaining a steady muscle tone, her EMG would be flat. So what keeps us from falling down? Muscles, of course, but I don't think they work quite the way you think they do. When you are standing, your center of mass is not perfectly aligned with your skeletal support and the point of pushback from the ground. You should then fall to the ground like a misaligned stack of blocks. We know that the joints are not stiff at all, but really quite floppy and loose, with the synovial joint even slippier than the best ball bearings. Joints supported by ligaments and fascia alone are limp. So let's focus in on the muscles. As Aristotle points out, the first order of business is stability. And the odds are high that resting muscle tone has a significant role in this. Since the early 1900s, we have known that muscles that span multiple joints may function as part of closed kinematic chains, and the muscles involved in those chains may remain isometric and isotonic. As we've already noted, isotonic muscles are hidden from the prying eyes of EMGs. We now understand that much of animal locomotion is dependent on closed kinematic chain mechanisms. Closed kinematic chain mechanisms are ubiquitous in biologic organisms. As shown in this illustrative model, locking one joint may lock up the whole kinematic chain. So muscle tone and closed kinematic chains could possibly stiffen the entire system, with only a flicker or two noted in the EMG. Since we would be a floppy mess without them, the main purpose of the muscles would be to stiffen the joints. Let us take a step back and try and understand the basic physiology of muscles. As kids, we all grew up knowing about muscles. In my day, we tried to emulate Charles Atlas, and then Arnold came along, setting a new standard. The forever model has been muscles are agonists and antagonists, and they shorten and lengthen, and movement is created by the muscles shortening and lengthening. As they shorten, they bulk up. As they extend, they thin out. Going backwards, say, by powers of 10, muscles arise from muscle bundles, which arise from muscle fascicles, which arise from muscle fibers, which arise from muscle fibrils, which go back to the sarcomere, which, according to the sliding filament theory, is where the shortening and lengthening of the muscle occurs. This model is well and good for explaining concentric and eccentric contraction, but it runs into a serious snag when you're trying to explain the oxymoronically titled isometric contraction. Here is Arnold again performing a so-called isometric contraction of all his torso muscles. Let's call it what it is an auxitic expansion of his muscles. Let's try to clarify this. We think of muscles and most materials as getting thinner and longer when stretched, and shorter and thicker when compressed. Not to get too technical about it, they are said to have a positive Poisson's ratio. However, there is a group of matter that expand or contract in all dimensions simultaneously, and they have what is known as a negative Poisson's ratio. It seems to be more a property of the geometry and not of the basic material. The negative Poisson's ratio may enhance certain physical properties such as density, stiffness, fracture toughness, energy absorption, and damping. And most germane to our purposes, it is a property of the tensegrity icosahedron, individually and in composite structures. Auxitic behavior has been described in tendon, skin, bone, collagen, and just about any collagenous tissue that has been studied with auxism in mind. And auxism gives us a whole new way of looking at the upright stance and all body postures, human or creatures. With each heartbeat, with each breath, the body expands auxitically. Let's check on Arnold again. He is performing an isometric expansion of his muscle. Not this, but this. The question then arises, how do muscles normally operate, conventionally or auxitically? In the lab, you can get muscles to behave with a positive Poisson's ratio, but we know that any shortening or lengthening of a muscle from its normal resting length only weakens the muscle. So shortening or lengthening a muscle, as in a concentric contraction, seems like something that should be avoided. As we have discussed previously, muscles working as part of closed kinematic chains may remain isometric, and closed kinematic chains may be linked together so the whole system can expand and contract auxitically. As you can see, it's a shape changer. With closed kinematic chains, there is no need for muscles to shorten or lengthen, and the four-bar mechanism is ubiquitous, as depicted here in the cruciate ligament of the knee, the jaw mechanism of a fish, the wings of birds, the stay mechanism of a horse, and the quadriceps and hamstring mechanism of humans, and probably any other ambulating creature. Not to change the subject, but the focus, this is cyclohexane, an industrial-strength organic chemical that with only a bit of prompting can flip back and forth from solid to liquid and back again, phase changing at whim. And here is another example of phase changing occurring without great exchanges of heat.
What is silly putty? Well, it's a real solid liquid. If you pull it so, it'll go forever, like taffy. But if you give it a sharp tug, it'll break like a biscuit. Now, when you make silly putty round and drop it, it'll bounce higher than a rubber ball.
Silly putty is a class of matter called soft condensed matter, or simply soft matter, that sits somewhere between liquid and solid. It can be pulled, pushed, and mushed about like a gel or soft clay, or rolled into a ball that could be squished or bounced.
Ball and bounce it.
Drop it, it'll bounce higher than a rubber ball.
Soft condensed matter has only been clearly recognized as a subset of matter since the 1970s. It is often associated with the ability to rapidly phase change in a variety of ways and under varying circumstances. We will skip the details for now. Biology is soft matter come alive. We are all soft matter. And as soft matter is noted for its phase-changing capabilities, we should expect no less in biologic tissues. Phase changing in biology was noted some 2,400 years ago, as noted by my colleague at that time. This instantaneous back and forth phase transformation is apparent in biologic structures almost any place you look for it. Here it is in mucin, the snot coming out of a kid's nose that can be soft and slimy and stretchy, but they may turn into shoe leather tough. So the hardening we see of muscle under a so-called contraction may actually be a phase change under an exotic expansion. So let's review what we know about muscles. Supposedly, muscles function by shortening or lengthening. Possibly, but that doesn't happen when they are part of closed kinematic chains. Supposedly, one muscle does one thing to one joint, but that is certainly not true when a muscle crosses more than one joint. Supposedly, muscles work as agonists or antagonists, and that too misrepresents how muscles normally function. And EMGs are a very limited tool that only lets you know when a muscle is actively increasing its tension. Now we know muscles are what pull you up, right? Here are the theoretical calculation of forces when a person is holding a 10 Newton weight, about 1 kilogram. That's about 10 apples. I picked this example because of the body posture. Note the compression force on lumbar spine is 1,300 newtons, and that comes out to be about 1,300 apples, and that's equivalent to a force of 10 bushels of apples. And the dynamics of moving a body from sitting to standing would require even more force than just a static posture. You want proof? I'll give you proof. The standard muscle bone lever model is that muscles shorten and lever you up into the air. Now muscles are tension springs, and to pull it must have something stationary and fixed to pull against. If we are like marionettes being hauled into the sky, who is the guy pulling the strings? Don't tell me we are lifting ourselves from the ground by pulling on our bootstrap. The truth is, we are anchored to the ground by gravity, and muscles can only pull in and down. A less energy depleting solution would be interconnected closed kinematic chains, auxetically expanding and contracting, and changing the shape of the organism. And what would power this mechanism? The stored potential energy in the very springy bones which push up and out. We bounce up in the air, and falling in forward momentum keep us moving ahead. What is clear is that we know a lot less about muscles than we thought we did. What we do know is that muscles stiffen joints, and muscles are eccentric with a negative Poisson's ratio. They can bulk up and stiffen without shortening. Lombard's closed kinematic chains seem to be widely applicable. And the importance of phase change cannot be overemphasized. The material properties of soft matter like muscle are transactional, and depending what you ask of it, may undergo instantaneous transformations. It could behave like toothpaste squeezed from a tube, latex paint poured from a can, spring steel stiff, stiffening like cornstarch in water, or any variation of those. It is the structural organization, not the brute force of muscles, that maintain the organism's dynamical systems. So here is where we started, and now you understand why none of this is true.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Now, Steve, you said that you were expecting questions from people. Anybody who does want to make a comment or question, we would love it if you would use the raise hand feature. And Steve, I think, let's see, you're muted right now. I'm gonna.
Okay, anybody
There you
wants?
go.
I'm open for questions.
All right. Step right up, my friends. Steve, every time I watch this, I get something out of it. I think I know it. I think I know the material. And then every time I catch just a little something,
There's a lot of packed into this one.
All right, we're going to hear from Craig. Craig, I'm going to spotlight you and Steve.
Okay, hello everyone. There's a comment I'd like to make about auxetic expansion, and that's to do with the change in density. So if your volume's changing, and it's a liquid, it would be very difficult to change the density would also have to change of the muscle. So it's auxetic seems to be a structural change within the muscle, but I still don't quite understand change in density implications. Do you have any comment there?
No, that's beyond me right now. I obviously there are things changing, but the, I mean, when you get that bounce from, say soft matter, and you hit the ground at that time, that silly putty is hitting the ground, it's harder and must be denser too for that instant that it strikes the ground. So there must be, it's like water changing to going from steam to water to ice. When it gets denser, just like water does, gets stiffer
Right.
when
We
to
know
ice.
we know there are phase changes, and we know that, for example, like what are considered perfect liquids, right? In the condensed matter world of physics are non-compressible, right? I think that's what you're referring to, Craig. But soft matter is in between liquid and solid. It's in a place that's in between. So we're not talking about liquid.
Okay, so I seem to gather that the liquid in the muscle is bound to structure as well, and
There's
it's not
no
free
liquid.
liquid.
There's no
There's no
liquid,
liquid in the body.
right?
So
Well,
as it says, it's structurally bound to other tissue.
Well,
It's
but
not.
there's fluid. There's fluidic flowing stuff, but it's not in the category of liquid, which is a pretty specific thing in terms of the physics. And so it has room for compressibility. That's my understanding.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
yeah, well, that's very good. We're not talking about liquids. There are no liquids in the body. They're fluids. They're gels, and the gel changes its consistency and it usually related to the force and the acceleration of that force. So things get hard and soft depending on how fast you load them. So bone gets stiffer if you load it faster.
Right. So I gather then that the water content is structurally bound to other tissues, which is not it's less dense for that reason. It's because that is a problem I've considered. How does as it gets auxetic expansion, you've got to have your volume's got to change, and that's got to lower the density of the auxetic material. So if it's not pure liquid, then it's the only way it can happen.
Yes, it's not pure liquid. The water, it's probably water itself is probably in a icosahedral state and is bound into the proteins. So as part of the protein molecule, there's no water in the system that you can squeeze out.
Right. That answers my question.
Chris, why
Okay.
don't you come up?
Oh, okay. Hi, thank you. And maybe Craig, look at Gerald Pollack's work, the fourth phase of water.
Yes, so that is the issue, and I think everyone should understand Pollock's work about it's called easy zone, which is the exclusion zone, where the water forms compresses out the impurities along the surfaces of biological surfaces, and that's very important work. Everyone should study that. Everyone should have a working knowledge of that.
And I'll just chime in to say I heard a physicist talking recently saying that there are 18 states of ice.
Wow.
So we've got a
Cool.
lot to learn about this stuff.
I
Go
agree.
ahead, Chris.
Okay, Steve, you talk about and have us even feel the auxetic abilities of muscles. And my question for you is, I'm really curious, have you thought about whether auxeticity might be an option for muscle activity, or are you feeling like all muscles are always acting in an auxetic manner?
I think it's always.
Cool.
I think it's always, and I think we completely misconstrued how muscles work. They don't shorten and lengthen, they tighten and stiffen. And movement is through the closed kinematic chains. And interesting enough, if a muscle doesn't shorten, it's not doing any work because work is defined as force times distance. And if you're not shortening the muscle, it's not doing work. And work requires more energy, so therefore it's a very energy efficient way of using the system.
So, according to the way you're thinking, correct me if I'm off track here. When a muscle is active, it expands auxetically, it stiffens, and so this stiffened tissue, or whatever you want to call it, then acts to create a pattern of a couple close kinematic chains that will then, have impact on movement.
Exactly. But the movement isn't through the muscles. It's through something else, probably the bone. I see it as bone, but bone also behaves auxetically too. So there's a whole mishmash of things that we don't yet understand when we're just beginning to understand this
And
concept.
when you say movement isn't through the muscles, you're talking, I'm thinking about movement in space. So that's by changing my this
Right.
center of mass with space. But the whether you want to call it motion or the changing, the reconfiguration of the body is impacted by the stiffness or lack of the action
I'm
of the muscle.
I'm not sure where that comes from yet.
Where the reconfiguration of the body.
Right, because you can reconfigure your body in space, or when you're falling out of an airplane when you're weightless. So you can reconfigure your body doing that. And that essentially is no gravity that you're doing it. But if you're introducing gravity, then when you move your hand, you have to fight gravity to do that. So there's a whole area in there that we don't quite understand yet. But until you start thinking this way, then you can't begin to understand these complex questions that we haven't asked yet.
And I'll just add, for those of you who don't know our Bouncing Bones paper, Ibn Sina theorized that the muscles were moving the bones around 1,000 years ago. This is an assumption that we've carried around for 1,000 years, and we've never really, proven or investigated or anything. I mean, we've investigated it only through the lens of assuming that it's correct. And what's interesting, for those of you who heard the early history of biotensegrity presentation that I did for the Big Portugal Alive, which is on the archive YouTube channel if you haven't seen any of those presentations, is that Ron Kirkby, when he was in 1975, when he was presenting to the structural integration community, because he had been studying these tensegrity structures and building them and trying to see how that linked to the body. This is something I've been. My sound did a funny thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was me. I didn't realize I wasn't muted. I was looking for the link to put from the early history presentation. My apologies.
Oh, that's fine. So Ron Kirkby said, we have been taught that the muscles are there to move the skeleton around. And he said, and when you study these things, he meant the tensegrities, he said, you start to understand that the bones could be functioning as spacers. And that's helping to move the soft tissue around, as opposed to the muscles moving our bones around and our bodies around. So that's a complete flip. So sorry to make you wait, Yasmin.
That's okay. I loved listening to.
Yasmin, am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are, Susan. Thank you.
Great.
So, as someone who has been fascinated with biotensegrity and how the felt experience emerges from within the body, when it comes to the soft matter, the way that I'm experiencing it is as a whole, a continuity. We often talk about continuity, and when you shared this bit about muscles, Steve, that really kind of highlighted how they don't work separately, or there's no muscle contraction. I don't experience that anymore in the body, but the entire soft matter web, if you like, is moving. The entire web is auxetic. So if I'm sending the ground away, this entire web is expanding. That's how I sense it. And then it's kind of rebounding back. Whether there's a breath, whether there's a simple sending of the ground away, there's very little effort, because the biotensegrity model or paradigm guides us to efficiency and chirality, the way everything moves, including muscle. So my question is around muscle itself. You've mentioned muscle. I'm kind of intrigued with the muscle fibrils, how they become part of the soft matter. So there's not, I don't imagine muscle anymore as separate, but interweaved into this soft matter that has an intelligence of motion. So it's not muscle that moves us, but it's the entire organism that is moving. And it's moving based on the principles that you share around biotensegrity, efficiency, the force transmission. And you mentioned gravity. So today I'm kind of wondering about gravity again. I've often talked about this organism being independent of gravitational pull as being the main force because we are already pretensioned. So I know there's a lot going on there, but that's my kind of take on motion, auxetic. Oh, one more thing, phase change. I talk about phase change often, and you mentioned how adding kind of load to bone stiffens the structure. In my experience, I'm finding oscillating movements or even just spontaneous bouncing, jumping off the ground where there's no effort, but my structure feels stronger with less effort. That's just something I wanted to share.
Yeah, well, when you do that, your body's every time you hit the ground, your body stiffens. I mean, you have to understand that, your tissues are really soft when you feel them, but once you hit that ground, everything stiffens and compresses as a spring, and you're really acting as a spring. And part of you is preloaded, but those are internal forces, not external forces, and you have to separate those two. And we haven't been able to do that yet, because we still think of the muscles moving things, and you can't do that. Muscles are internal forces and can't make external movements. So you have to figure out how to take energy from outside your closed system and move it through the system and modify it in some way or other to then get it out the other side. And that's and you want to do it efficiently. So your body is essentially a spring, and you have to, it's just how you control that spring. And you vary the tension in it. Fortunately, we can do that.
Now, Yasmin, you brought up so many questions. I want to make sure we caught them all, but I want to clarify. Soft matter is a category of matter, soft condensed matter, from the perspective of physics in terms of that they've only been classifying for the last, I don't know, less than 50 years, I think, depending on when you want to start the history. But it is a different thing from soft tissue in the body, right? So all of the body is soft matter, even the bones. All organisms, the soft condensed matter people, those physicists say that all organisms are soft matter. So even a shell, um so that's just distinguishing that from the softer tissues in the body. The word soft gets used in both, but they're very different things.
Yeah, thank you for that, Susan. That helps me to understand soft matter and soft tissue in the body. Yeah. In terms of questions answered, most of them. The spring, yes, the spring. I do get the kind of spring loading of our body, and you know that I'm all about kind of pandiculation and elastic recoil. So I'm kind of moving towards experiencing the body as a whole without actually separating the different systems. So I think those questions have been answered, and I'm so very grateful for this. So thank you.
When I was learning manual medicine with John Manel, one of his favorite phrases is that you cannot move just one muscle. So any one muscle movement means you're going to realign the whole system. And the contractile element, or the stiffening element, we should probably call it now, in the muscle, the cellular part that we call muscle, is just integrated into the fascia. And Robert Schleip wrote an article about the contractile elements in fascia, and he left out muscle, which of course is the contractive element in fascia. And I don't know why he found a couple of cells here and there that he said are the contractile elements, when the contractile elements of fascia, or should say again, stiffening elements of fascia, is the muscle.
All right. Thank you, Yasmin. Go ahead, Craig.
I when we talk about springs, I think it's very important to understand that most springs, almost all springs in the body, are torsional springs. That's twisting motion. It's not a shortening and contracting like we see a spring hanging from a weight. Almost all of the springs in the body are torsional springs, which don't change the potential and kinetic energy of the body. So a lot of the energy is stored in torsional springs and not as you see in the pictures of these springs going bounce, bounce, bounce.
Right.
All right. And let's see, we've got Sue Edwards. So you want to,
Can I just pop in to say also that Anna has a question, but she's unable to raise her hand.
yeah, so we'll go to Sue and then Bob and then Anna. Sue, did you want to? I'll bring you
I'll give it a
up.
try.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
You've been talking about muscles stiffening and shortening, and all my head keeps thinking about is dystonia. And
Hey,
Craig,
Sue, where are you coming in from? Just curious.
Oakville, Ontario.
Oh, great. And what's your background?
I have a chemistry degree.
Cool. Okay, we just, it's nice to get to know each other. Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt.
Anyway, yeah, with dystonia, you have cramping, tightening, pull that then seems to pull the joints apart. And I'm wondering if there's anything with this biotensegrity that would explain what's happening. So, and incidentally, dopamine helps that. And where in the chain would the dopamine fit in? I don't know.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that this enters into it. The problem is that we haven't figured out the normal yet to really be able to handle the abnormal. But
Okay.
until we really understand the normal, we can't move towards that. But the muscles expand if they behave auxetically, which they do, and that's been shown experimentally, then they expand and stiffen when it happens. So that, but we don't know how it fits into like a dystonia model. Um, we don't understand since we haven't fully worked out the normal. It's very hard to figure out what to do with the abnormal. But sometimes abnormal gives you a clue as to how the normal works.
Well, that's sort of what I was hoping.
Yeah. Well, you go ahead. See how you can help us.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Bob, come on up.
Thanks, Steve. That was a brilliant video. It's really helping improve my knowledge of what the whole systems works. And this may be a question maybe more for the weeds. I pretty much understand what you're saying about the polyarticular muscles and about how things work with closed kinematic chains. But do you have any sense how the single joint muscles work? Do they still work isometrically and isotonically, or could they be more concentric, eccentric? Where do they fit into this piece? Do you know?
Actually, no, but if I can't believe that they would work differently than the biarticular muscles. They must work in the systems differently, but I can't see them shortening or doing that thing. If, once you get the muscle working right, that's the way it's going to work. And that's the efficient way of muscle. That's the nature of the material you're working with. And so I think that this, what we call single joint muscles, probably link into other systems. So they'll work through the fascia. They'll work as part of a closed kinematic chain in bones, with the bone being part of it instead of another muscle. So I think what we think of as single joint muscles really are much more complex than we've given them credit.
Yeah, I was had that question before, but that's what I was thinking when you mentioned John Manel and your comment, before about that. So still that they probably would work isometrically and isotonically before.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
All right, I'm looking for Anna because she was going to come up next, but now I don't see her.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. There
I
you
don't
are.
know if you
Great.
can hear me. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
No,
Where are
thank you.
Where are you, Anna?
Sorry?
What part of the world are you in?
Oh, I'm in Portugal, in Porto,
Wonderful.
more specifically. Yes. So I have a question. Maybe it's not a very good one, but I was thinking about the slide when Steve showed in the presentation the stored energy in the bones, the stored potential energy. Does it exist, that potential energy? Is it inherent to the bone, or does it exist because of its relationship with the muscles? I'm not sure if my question is clear.
No, your question is fine. My question, I haven't thought of it before. I would think, I think it's the nature of the structure. So that it's a tensegrity structure, and tensegrity structures have stored energy within it. So if we think of it as a tensegrity with the bone as a tensegrity, then the very structure has, as a tensegrity, it never zeroes out in a tensegrity. It's always pretensed. So I would assume that all the tissues in the body are pretensed.
Okay, thank you.
And the bones are like compression springs, but the softer tissues are functioning, we're theorizing, more like tension springs.
Right.
And so they're loading each other mutually, just like if you built a tensegrity, you're sitting there with these struts and strings, and then to really make it come together, you've got to pull and get that last thing together, and then all of a sudden it's its own thing, and everything is doing everything to each other. And so
that goes at every scale level. So within the bone, the same thing is happening. So when you start going down to the next scale level and down to the cellular level and probably subcellular level, that same interplay is going on at that level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for being here.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again. And Anna, I posted the observation in the chat, which was very relevant to that. And exactly, so how I see it and how the system is closed. So the tension in the muscle and the connective tissue is creating the structure, and the structure is what's pulling and expanding and contracting, which creates the tension. So they're mutually supportive to create the space that you can explore by either a bone breaking or the connective tissue being cut. They're different aspects of the system which enables them to exist. And going back to Bob's question, how does that work in the sacrum? Well, it's a complicated version of what you're explaining. If you could expand it out, the sacrum's just pulling and pushing against the whole of the rest of the system to create the space that looks like the sacrum. You're nodding. So do you see what I'm getting at? It's like we're trying to break it down to try and understand it. But if you can expand out a little bit more, you can see how the whole system is pulling and pushing to create this space that allows the sacrum to manifest. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, Well, it doesn't matter which level you work at. It's the same interplay at every scale. So
Yes.
you're right. So there is always this balance of tension and compression within
Mm,
the system that goes on. Now, the problem that we've had all along is that we've always thought of muscles then moving us through space, but muscles can't do that. You have to take an external force and
mm,
bring it into the system and redirect it so it goes out of the system.
yes. But how about the external force coming from movement? So you've got a shape, and then from your bouncing bones video, you decide to move forwards. So as you move forwards, your shape, the balance, the weight in your body changes the tension and compression, which allows the movement to manifest. It's like it creates a torque that then the system then uses to move with.
Yeah, but you have to get the energy from the ground reaction force.
But you said yourself, you can move in when you're free falling without gravity.
Right. That's your stored energy in your system, and that requires very little energy to move you
Yeah.
because you
So it's
no gravity.
So the system is so clever that even if you haven't got gravity, you can alter your weight distribution by movement, and that then manifests as the redistribution of tension and compression.
Yeah, but that's within the system.
Yeah,
Yes.
Adam, you can reconfigure yourself when you're in free
Yes.
fall, but you
Exactly.
cannot change the trajectory of your center of mass.
No.
And so when we say move, it's like we end up using the word move to mean all these different things at once. So what to be distinguished here is causing the inertia of the center of mass, whatever it is, still or moving, causing the inertia to change requires an external force. But reconfiguring within the system where the center of mass is not moving through space or changing its inertia, I should
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
reconfiguring is something we can do without ground reaction force.
That's brilliant. So, but then imagine I'm falling through space and I put my arm out. So yes, that's an internal change, but my arm has moved in relation to falling through the air. So that you can't separate the internal and the external interaction.
I'm not sure what you said. Can you say it again?
I'm falling through air.
Okay, you're on the high diving board, you jump up, and you're falling through.
And then while I'm falling through the air, before I hit the pool, I put my arm out.
Yes.
So that I've created that movement from an internal interaction, but in relation to how my body feels the air and how I'm moving through the air, my shape and the air pressure has changed because I've changed my shape. So there's an external response to my internal movement.
But your center of mass trajectory has not changed.
But it could change because my arm's made. It might change my aerodynamic shape.
No, your center of mass, the inertia of your center of mass cannot change. The guy jumps off the diving board and flip, and he can do all these things, but he can't keep himself from falling. His center of mass is falling on a gravity line to the center of the earth. And
I agree, but he can alter. You can alter a little bit how you fall by changing your shape.
But that's getting an external force into the system again.
Yes. And I think we're a manifestation of our internal shape, which is your genius, interacting with external forces.
Right.
You can't separate. I can't look at myself without looking at how I interact with the world around me.
Right. So it's that interaction that gets you any energy and movement.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's the force that enables us to move. And I just really like how you've linked us all together. So thank you very much for letting me to to discuss it with you. It's an honor. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Go ahead, Craig.
Well, what we're discussing here at the moment is free fall and changing your body shape, say if a diver jumps off a diving board. But before the diver's free falling, they go through a whole lot of postural jumps that are specific to include external forces into the body, which then can be expressed by internal movements. Divers go through very specific jumps with their arms up, legs up, and bounces off their toes. All those postures are putting internal stresses into the body, which then can be expressed in the free fall. So typical biomechanics, you look at the motion without considering how it starts. So if you look at how it starts, they're putting all those dynamic expressions that will be expressed in the free fall are put in through the spring of the board. Another example is a high jumper. They run in a specific way to put in all the internal stresses that can then be expressed specifically to get maximum height. So most biomechanics look at the runner, their foot coming down onto the ground, but they ignore the fact that it has to be put in before they get there. And that's a problem. So when you're jumping on your board, your specific motions are putting specific loads on specific parts of your body, which you then can express. If you just fall off the board, you can't turn or twist or anything. You just fall off. If you just lean off and fall, you can't do all these maneuvers. So it's all pre-stressing.
It's like you can't jump from a standing upright position. You have to squat a little bit and then jump up in order to get some energy into your system.
And also technically of looking at potential and kinetic energy in a classic system, you just consider potential and kinetic energy, but that's not strictly true. All the big discoveries, even Newton's laws, involve the principle of least action. And least action includes, as Steve mentioned earlier, force times distance. So that's called work in mechanics. And that is what provides you extra potential and kinetic energy within your body. It's part of the least action principle, where least action is minimized. And that includes the force times the distance the object moves. And that least action, the force times the distance move, is what's preloading your kinetic and potential energy, which then can be expressed once you break ground contact. So the principle of least action is important, and that includes the external force times the distance it moves the body. So if anyone's interested in that, it's important to consider the principle of least action rather than potential and kinetic energy alone, which we do in school. They just say there's potential energy converts to kinetic energy, but they then ignore the ground, what Steve said, the ground reaction force, which induces it comes in the principle of least action, which was foundational to Newton's laws. It's just not taught that way, but it is fundamental to it and must be included in any logical system.
All right, Yasmin, you can come on up again.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks, Craig.
Craig, that was really helpful too. You answered the question that I'd kind of forgotten I'd asked, which was about gravity and the ground reaction force. And now it's making a lot more sense. And I go back to how children explore motion from the ground. So that there is a sensing the ground for the movement to emerge. So there is this potential kinetic energy within the body, but there is the requirement of the ground force for motion to occur. So I just wanted to highlight how this conversation has helped me kind of understand that more. Whereas before I was possibly coming to it in a different way, where I was just looking at the potential the kinetic energy, but there has to be some kind of ground reaction force. So that's been really helpful. So yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. We've got another 15 minutes or so. And I know that there are at least 3 people that probably have been saying, oh, my question's not important enough. But it is, it is, it is. So please don't hesitate to come up, because it's a lot harder when everyone tries to ask the question in the last 3 minutes. Go, Michelle, are you?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you up, Michelle, okay?
Yes, thank you so much for all this precision. I learn all the time with you. And for me, I have just one question is about your article, very beautiful, about bouncing bones and and about movement. You said body has to lean to walk and to progress in space. It's better that to stay on vertical only, but yes, to lean a little. And you show the body of a woman from Guatemala who lean when they walk. So you can explain something about that, Steve?
Well, in order, what we feel is, and it's been, an old concept that walking is controlled falling.
Yeah.
And that so it's just a question of moving your center of mass so it's falling forward, and then you follow through with it. So, but it's always taking that energy from the ground, which is, gravity, to use, it is the efficient use of gravity, is how you take it from the ground reaction force, the gravity you have, and move it through the system. The most efficient way is to steal it from gravity rather than use, your stored muscle energy, which really isn't very much, and move your body through space by getting gravity to pull you forward. So it's just a question of leaning forward, which accelerates your forward motion, gets your center of mass in front of your base of support that pulls you forward, and then you got to bring your limbs forward to put it under your feet, under your center of mass. The interesting thing is that you have to understand that the force of gravity is only straight from the center of the earth and doesn't go out in angles. So if you want to get the maximum pushback without a lot of shear, which would be if you're doing it at an angle, you want to only move that center of mass at exactly the point when your center of mass is directly over your point of support, which is when you hit the foot. So that becomes the magic instant when that happens. And you don't have underfoot shear, and it's underfoot shear that, slows things down.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. It's great to see you. Go ahead, Bob.
I'll follow up with that, Steve. I taught a class on the effects of biotensegrital manual therapy over the weekend, and one of the videos I showed was the running back Barry Sanders running, and how he could always spin and not be tackled and change directions very quickly. And if you watch it very slowly, that's exactly what he did. He would wait until his center of mass was vertical, and then he would push, and from that direction he could spin and the people chasing him, weren't directly vertical and they couldn't react as quickly and couldn't maneuver. So that's how he was able to, to escape. And I showed another video of the Olympic breakdancers, and when they would change direction too, you could see even if their base of support was just kind of on an arm, it was vertical. It was vertical aligned, and that would allow them to quickly, change into different postures. So when you watch those videos from that perspective, I think you'll see in a lot of different athletic or other types of dance movements that's exactly what they're doing. So I appreciate that. Those comments. A quick question in terms of, I know you had mentioned to Sue Edwards before this, that you're still trying to figure out, normal, and it's hard to figure out, other types of aspects for it. But now that you've done muscles and bouncing bones and closed kinetic chains, what's next on your horizon that you think anything else you're studying to try to expand this conversation farther?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to really solidify the concept of internal and external forces, which seems to be a problem for everybody because the internal external forces are constantly changing in some people's minds, and they don't know how to move what's in and what's out. And so I'm working on trying to get a short video on that to explain internal versus external forces.
Right. I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, none of this is. Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm really happy that I'm really getting fun with these videos. It's a whole new world to develop these video concepts and learn how to use a video and get them to work right. So I'm excited by that. My brain's still working enough to get that done.
For sure.
Craig's going to come back up again.
Okay, everyone's talking about internal and external forces. Forces arise when there's an acceleration of mass. That's what's called a force. A force actually is just like the speedometer on your car. Does not propel you. A force does not propel you. It is just a measure of your change in your motion. So most people think of forces that push you and shove you. It's not how force is defined. Force is defined if you move, there was a force. The force doesn't push you. It's a consequence of what's happening, and that's a change in momentum. So if you look at Newton's laws without forces, and he never defined force in the way we conventionally use it, it's a change of momentum. Now, if you've got to look at his third law, which says for every change of momentum, there's an equal and opposite change in momentum in the other direction. So if you've got one force happening, you've got an inverse force in the other direction. And since they're both momentum, Newton's third law defines a conservation of momentum, which means nothing's happening. So if you're standing still, according to Newton's third law, nothing will carry on happening, and that's a conservation of momentum. It's only when you cut a body that is moving, like say a dissection, if you take a dissection and cut off muscles, you are inducing a split in that body, and parts of that body can move one way and parts can move the other way. But that's your choice of where you put the cut. So this maps directly onto the section of the body. So when you cut the body up, you've pre-decided what's going to happen. So you create the description of forces, internal and external, through the dissection model of muscles and bones. That distinction doesn't exist except through our conception of dissection. So internal and external forces, Newton says with these laws, there is no motion. In other words, momentum's conserved. And he says two other principles are needed, and he doesn't define them. So most people are saying, what's internal, external force? It's where you put your own cut. You decide what's external and internal by deciding where you cut the conserved body. So part of their body will move one way, other part will move the other way. And so when you come along and you do a dissection, we in fact creating the problem of external and external forces on muscles and bones. And no one can really understand it because it's your choice. You've made it. Now, can't ask someone else to explain it because you made that choice and you've been taught that choice. And no one understands it because they won't admit they made the choice. It's your own choice. You can't understand your own choice. You're looking for it in a different system. So you're asking someone else to explain a choice of where you cut the body. And that's all it is. And understanding is force does not push you. It's the body moves, and that is measured as a force. The force does not push you. Einstein showed that gravity is not a force. It's just a choice of reference frame. So the issue with forces and talking about forces and understanding forces is they're not the thing that pushes you. They're just a measure of the change of motion, which occurs in your body, and it's not. So you're already doing the motion and creating forces, but the forces are not relevant. So a bit of a complicated explanation, but that's the reality of the situation.
That's why I'm having so much trouble trying to figure out how to present it. It's very complicated and hard for people to grasp some of these concepts.
I read Newton's what we say is query 32, which occurs in his optics. So his last public work, the last statement in his last public work, Newton specifically says when you apply his laws of motion, there is no motion. He specifically says that. You can work it out logically through his third law, but Newton actually says that. You need two other things to be happening for motion to occur, and he doesn't describe them. So when you're using forces and trying to figure out what's going on, we have to come up with two different principles. And Newton says that himself. No one seems to worry about what he said. So it's up to us to find those two principles.
So we're still working on it. Thanks, Craig. All right, Mary, come on up. Let's see. We need you to unmute.
Okay, here I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm at the beginning of understanding everything, and much of what goes through today goes into my body. I understand a lot of it, I think, in my tissues. But I couldn't tell you at all what you said, you know. But here's my question. It came up after what Bob said about the Olympic, the break dancers, because I was watching them too back in the Summer Olympics, and I was looking at the difference between how the break dancers use their body and the surfers, and the way they interact with their environment, compared to the Olympic winner of the gymnastics, Simone Biles, whose body seems a lot like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and who doesn't move what I would consider in a flowing, graceful way. She's extremely coordinated, but it's not human in the sense of what I think this community is looking for or trying to describe movement as. Does that make any sense as a question, observation?
I think you need to go on a little more. It's not human.
Well, it looks, there's almost robotic quality when the muscular system is so engaged in coordinating the body to do these tricks that almost are separate from the medium in which the body is, compared to the way the break dancers use gravity, right? It's a real relationship. And the way the surfers use the water, it's a real relationship. And that relationship comes up through them. I suppose this is all about forces and a different way of digesting the forces that you're dealing with. But my, I don't see that in some of the more elite gymnasts, for example. I see them mostly controlling their body rather than interacting with their medium in the same way that the other people are. No? Yes?
Steve, I think you're muted.
It's an observation, but I haven't really thought of it that way. I think one of the things you have to recognize is that the gymnast is always going to move to a static posture. It's moving, it goes from one thing to a point, while the surfer and the dancer are always interested to the next step. There's a flow into another step. So the goal of what happens is, like the gymnast is going to hit a stone wall. It's going to boom land. And so it's directing all their force to this one particular thing. And most of the time, they have to stupidly absorb all that energy into their system without moving out of it. And that would knock the teeth out of your jar of teeth out of your jaw. But that's what happens. So I think part of that may be what you're seeing.
It's like a stop and start that they must do in order to do what their
Right.
sport.
That's their sport. While the other ones are flowing from one posture to the other. So they're never completely absorbing all that energy. They're taking it to move to the next place.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful way to think about it.
I would just like to add that elite sports are the extremes of human motion.
Of course.
So you only become elite when you are at the extreme of the motion. So otherwise you wouldn't become elite. So that's an interesting.
That's true, but I'm looking at it in terms of trying to help ordinary people move through their lives. And I'd rather see them move in that flowing, changing way than going from stop to stop, which is what most people do.
But doesn't it also depend on what the goal of the
let's say house cleaning.
Goal, so in other words, if you're, I don't know, changing a light bulb or pushing a car out of the snow or, swimming, these are all very different actions with very different goals. And so your body's going to do what it needs to do to meet the goal. And sometimes, like if I'm bracing myself because somebody needs to stand up and they need to hang on to my arm, I'm going to do something that I may not typically do in order to meet that demand.
Yeah, and I think that's what most people do, brace in that moment. But what I'm playing around with is it's not necessary. One could expand in that moment. One could take advantage of what Steve is talking about and respond to the moment in a more efficient and less cluttered way, that you don't take the tension with you, that you've, kind of recruited to manage that moment.
Right. But then when you get to extremes, now you've got to pick up a big rock or try to roll a big rock. You know what I mean? You want as much of that whole body movement as you can get because the effort's going to be distributed.
Right.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. And when the body has that expansiveness, it's stronger and the task is easier. Right. And so I'm looking at, well, these surfers, it looks so much more flowing and easy to use the body that way because they are expanded. Whereas I think some of those elite gymnasts are not in expansion in their body, they're compressed. That's what it looks like to me. And I just wondered if I'm seeing things or, what you guys think of that.
It reminds me of something you may have heard me talk about before, the difference between Fred Astaire and
Gene Kelly.
Gene Kelly, right? So when
Right.
I see Gene Kelly, I see him like using the ground and driving off of things. And when I see Fred Astaire, it's like he's very, very light.
Exactly.
And it's a very different approach,
Mhm.
but they're both doing something. I think they're both in a state of joy when they're moving.
Right.
So I think as long as the person's doing what they like to do, I mean, if somebody likes to lift weights, that's what they like to do, let them do it. I remember I had a student who was a tap dancer. And so he was only in school. I was teaching K-8 schools, and he was only in school part of the time because he was touring with his tap dancing troupe. And so he never behaved. He was so full of himself. He had a high salary, and he's a kid. So I had him in for detention because of his behavior. And hang on, I've got to plug in. And I said, "Where's your weight when you're um when you're dancing?" And he said, "Well, it's nowhere really." Because, tap dancers, they're moving so quickly from one foot to the other. And I said, "Where's your weight?" And he said, "Well, hold on, let me figure it out." Danced a little and he said, "It's really nowhere."
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. Do you want to hear the comment from the Rolfing perspective?
Please.
It'll take me a minute. When I studied with Ida Rolf, she wasn't very interested in muscles. In fact, I wormed my way into the class. I knew no biology whatsoever. And I never had ever studied anatomy. And I was just, flying blind. And later I heard that sometimes she actually asked students not to study anatomy. Okay, so this is very curious. And so the one muscle that she did emphasize all the time was the psoas. It seemed like there was only one muscle in the body, and that's the psoas. So when you're looking at Fred Astaire and your tap dancing student, the movement is organized with the upper end of the psoas, the proximal end, as the fixed point, and the psoas is pulling up. So it's like the person is swinging from the top of the psoas, whereas Kelly is working from the distal end of the psoas, and he's going down to go up using the psoas. So I think that's an interesting, and they're both good, but what's the problem is that if you're stuck in one orientation or the other and you can't change, because sometimes you need to be hunkered down and stopped, and sometimes you need to fly.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we're a little past time. Did you want to say something, Craig? Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, at the first big conference in France, I think it's 2009, there was the head of the Monaco Ballet was there. So he was describing that ballet, the word ballet means float. And ballerinas and what they're doing is floating through the air. So that's their whole skill, is to float. And that's the whole art of ballet, is to float. And thought I'd add that to the conversation.
And they can only float. And so when they walk down the street, they're still floating. And at the end of their life, they have hip replacements because they have overused that particular habituation of contraction from the proximal psoas.
Well, I walk bare feet all the time, and I don't have hip and knee replacements either. So
Oh, good.
good luck if you wear shoes. That's
Thanks, Craig. All right, Steve Schafferman. This will be, I think, our last question.
I just want to add that Feldenkrais also strongly discouraged us from studying anatomy. And the whole thinking in the Feldenkrais method is to look at the body as a dynamic system and how every movement involves the whole person. And one reason he called the work functional integration was to really emphasize that we organize in terms of what it is we're trying to achieve, walking, reaching, whatever it might be. And the whole system ideally organizes to facilitate that. Where we have hip problems and knee problems and such is when the system is not organizing so efficiently and muscles are contracting excessively in some area. So an ideal ballet dancer should not have hip replacements at the end of their career, but should continue to move efficiently, except that the way ballet is taught and the way most of us have been trained in exercise and other movement practices is that we focus on individual muscles and joints and parts so disrupt the natural integrity of healthy movement.
Yes, we're on the same page.
So I think that ties in with some of the things Mary was saying and some of the things Craig was saying, and with Steve's video, which is a nice summary of many things you've talked about in the past,
Yes.
Steve. And so I look at muscles and bones and fascia and such as an elastic suit that stiffens in some areas and lengthens in other areas. And the whole suit is constantly reconnecting, but always fundamental relation to gravity and environment around us.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little, but I think we've got it. Yeah, definitely in Tai Chi, we're looking for least effort with our movements. How can you do it where you're doing everything and nothing's happening? I remember trying to do one movement, should I lift my arms this way? Should I lift them like this? And the guy said, don't do anything. No, do nothing. You need to do nothing. And so then you're trying to do something while you're doing nothing, which of course is, that's the challenge. Anyway, I think we're ready for perhaps a closing toast. You want to do it, Steve?
Well, I just want to thank you all for listening to me. It's been, I've been at this for over 50 years, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be at it, but so far my brain seems to keep going, so I'll keep going as long as I can. And thank you all for just coming by and saying hello.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
So much.
And we will meet again next week for Ask Steve Anything. Now we're really going to put him on the spot.
When is that? What time is that, or where? When?
The same time. I'll send out a newsletter in the next few days with the registration link.
Okay.
But we pretty much keep the tea parties to Friday, 1:00 East Coast time.
Great.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ciao, grazie.